Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2024 Buick Envision Preferred. This is Buick's often forgotten compact SUV, which is somewhere between the non-luxury and luxury segments. So while Buick does market themselves as a luxury brand, they are definitely priced lower than the German and Japanese rivals, and rightfully so. Buick gave all of their vehicles a pretty significant refresh starting in the 2023 model year, and for the Envision here, it got the refresh in the 2024 model year, and that's the one I have right here. The one I have here is the Preferred trim, which means that's the lowest trim. You've got Preferred, then you've got the Sport Touring, and then the Avenir at the top, which gives you a lot of luxurious materials. In the significant refresh in the 2024 model year, you get that beautiful 30-inch ultra-wide infotainment screen, which is certainly the highlight of the refresh, but you've also got some very sleek and sharp styling differences, beginning with these beautiful headlights. So, does the Envision have what it takes to compete with established vehicles like the BMW X3, Mercedes GLC, or the Audi Q5, or is it more like the RAV4 and CR-V? Well, in terms of pricing, the 2024 Envision starts at about $35,000 for the MSRP for the Preferred trim, that's the lowest trim, and it can go up above $40,000 for the higher trims. All Envision trims come with a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder like many rivals. This one makes 228 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, gives you 0 to 60 times about 7.5 seconds. That's definitely pretty slow, especially compared to some of the luxury, more athletic rivals. This engine is mated to a 9-speed automatic transmission with standard all-wheel drive across the entire lineup. No longer do they offer the front-wheel drive version of this vehicle. And that gives you fuel economy numbers of 22 city, 28 highway, for a combined 24 miles per gallon, which is about standard in this class. All right, let's dive into the exterior refresh here. So I really love what Buick's done across their lineup. When I first saw these refreshed exterior facades, I thought they looked super cool, much more luxurious than their old vehicles, which honestly looked super dated at this point. So you've got these beautiful sleek headlights, right? That's probably the most important part that makes this look very modern and more luxurious, kind of more deserving of that higher price tag. Definitely looks a lot fancier than your typical RAV4 or CR-V. So the headlights are beautiful, full LEDs. They've also got really cool sequential turn signals and a very nice startup dance. This is, I think, the only vehicle I've ever driven at the sub $40,000 price point that has a startup dance with their lights. So that is an awesome luxury touch. Kudos to Buick for doing that. The color here is called Moonstone Gray Metallic. It actually looks silver in most angles. It definitely has some bluish hues in there, but I will say that I think it's probably because of all the chrome on the outside that it looks a bit more silver. You do also get Buick's new logo. Looks a lot more luxurious and simple. You've got the triple shield look here, but it's not in that weird little format that it used to be where it was diagonal. So I think that looks very nice and just looks overall much more luxurious than previous years. Otherwise, the front fascia is not too notable. Like I said, a lot of chrome. You do have real vents and stuff like that. You have a little chrome lip at the bottom, but otherwise it's not too special. But I do like the look of it a lot. Going into the side profile here, you've got these 18-inch technical gray alloy wheels. These are the base wheels essentially, but I think they look quite nice, right? They definitely complement the huge amount of chrome. I think Buick is really going for that old luxury look. For example, you've got chrome around the windows, you've got chrome roof racks, you've got this chrome accent bar at the very bottom as well, chrome on the door handles as well. So I mean, just really a lot of chrome all over the place. You do get keyless entry, but you do have a button that you have to hit. So I guess it's kind of semi-keyless entry, but it's worked pretty easily. Going into the rear profile, this is definitely not as exciting as the front fascia, right? The front fascia looks very modern, sleek, very attractive. It honestly reminds me of a Porsche Macan. The rear is definitely not that exciting, right? This is going to look a lot more like normal economy vehicles. You do get the sequential turn signals, which I think is pretty nice, very Audi reminiscent. But otherwise, the rear doesn't really have too much interesting stuff, right? You've got typical badging. You don't have, Buick or Envision spelled out. I feel like almost every vehicle is doing that these days, so I'm kind of surprised Buick didn't hop on that trend, but I think this looks fine. Going into the trunk here, you don't have a power liftgate, unfortunately, so you have to manually open this. But you've got 25.2 cubic feet of cargo space. If you fold the second row seats down, you've got over 50 cubic feet of cargo space. So, I mean, about average, a little bit less than average in its class. Certainly still very practical, though, which is going to give you a lot more than a typical sedan. You've got a nice little handle here to close the trunk there, but otherwise in the rear you don't have too much exciting stuff. You've got some chrome at the bottom, no real visible exhaust tips or anything like that. The exhaust note certainly isn't anything to write home about, but you do get some rear parking sensors. Surprisingly, you don't have front parking sensors, so you'll kind of notice when I dive into the interior a bit more that the packaging on this vehicle is very strange. So you do have this keyless entry sort of thing where you just hit this button and it unlocks. You can also use that to lock the car. Taking a look right now in this golden hour, very beautiful. Interior is not so beautiful though, I would say. I think the one big glaring thing is that we don't have a pano sunroof or any sunroof at all, which does make it feel a little bit claustrophobic. All right, going inside, I mean, you got to talk about this beautiful 30-inch curved display here. It is a fantastic display, very, very snappy, very fast. All right, stop button is right here, hiding little bits. And I'm going to move my seat back all the way so that we have a bit more space. But I mean, first impressions of this is quite impressive, right? Compare this to a lot of other compact SUVs, especially something like the RAV4 in the non-luxury segment, and you can see why this is more expensive, right? This screen looks fantastic, very clear resolution, and just definitely a highlight of the interior. Let's talk about these seats first. So, got some nice stitching along the entire seat, and actually the door panels as well. It looks pretty luxurious, I would say. The seat is nothing too fancy, it's just what they call ebony, which is a standard black. And the seats are perforated, but unfortunately no heated or ventilated seats on the base trim here. So looking at the door panel here, one thing I want to point out is this very interesting trim. At first I wasn't sure if it was dirty, but then I realized it's actually the design of it to kind of go in this gradient from black to white or black to gray. Actually looks quite nice, I think. Definitely more interesting than just a normal trim, but it does look a little dirty, I feel sometimes, so got to keep that clean. Otherwise, the door panels are not too interesting, fully black here, and like I said, some cool stitching there, a good use of different materials. I would say this looks a bit more luxurious than a typical vehicle in the compact SUV segment, but again, I do think this interior is certainly a notch down from competitors like the Mercedes GLC, the Audi Q5, and the BMW X3. The Lexus NX still looks better than this as well, and that one is a much closer price point to this vehicle. The actual dash looks pretty nice. I would say there's some cool materials here. I do like this trim here. And this is kind of an interesting soft touch feel right here. A little bit of stitching there as well. And you've got chrome throughout a lot of this vehicle. Also on the door panels, you'll notice you'll have that chrome little accent. So this vehicle certainly goes for that sort of old school luxury, very similar to Mercedes where they use a lot of chrome. I think it looks nice, but it's certainly not for everyone, I would say. You do have some nice stitching here as well, and this is actually a soft leather here, which is pretty cool. I think overall the actual interior it's unremarkable, but I would say that it's still pretty good. One thing that's pretty cool to note on the base trim here is that you do have a Bose sound system, which is very shocking for a entry-level vehicle, right? It looks pretty nice. I like the little chrome thing in the middle of the Bose lettering, but it sounds pretty awful. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing to me that Bose even associates themselves with this sound system because it is truly terrible. Honestly, one of the worst sound systems I've heard at pretty much any price point. I honestly think the base RAV4 sound system is probably better than this. So a little embarrassing that Bose puts themselves on this sound system. It is a 9-speaker system, and it's just super hollow. Like, I don't know if I just need to play with the, the balance of it more, but like it sounds like it's coming out of a tin can or something like that. So certainly not a desirable sound system. If you want a better sound system, I really think you're going to want to stay away from this Envision as much as possible. You do have memory seating, which is pretty nice, and this is the base trim, which is quite impressive, right? So a lot of other vehicles, you have to get some sort of convenience package, tech package, or just step up to a higher trim to get memory seating. But here you've got 1, 2, and exit seating. So it's kind of cool. You can actually set the area, like where it goes to, the position it goes to when you're exiting your vehicle, which is pretty neat. The buttons here all feel pretty good. I assume a lot of these are borrowed from other GM products, but it feels nice. Like, these are certainly better than what you find in a lot of other competitors. So the buttons feel quite good. Interior build quality honestly feels pretty good overall. No creaks or rattles or anything that I could notice throughout my few days with this vehicle. But I have heard that Buick isn't the greatest in terms of that sort of stuff. So I'm not actually sure how reliable it is, honestly. But I think from what I've experienced with this vehicle, it's been pretty good. All right, let's take a look at the steering wheel here. So, steering wheel is quite thick. I think that's actually something that some people might not like. It is a leather-wrapped steering wheel, so it feels very good. And I think this is actually quite intuitive right here. You do have your media controls on the right-hand side and then your adaptive cruise control functions on the left. You do also have paddle shifters, which I always think is kind of hilarious. And one thing to note is that the volume up and skip track function are actually on the back of these paddle shifters, which is a very strange feel. I think that took a while for me to get used to, but it works pretty intuitively, right? Very similar to all other GM products like Chevy and stuff like that. You do have their new logo, the tricolor shield logo right here, which looks pretty nice and luxurious. And overall, the steering wheel, I like it. I think it feels good. You've got more chrome on the steering wheel, and overall it's pretty easy to use. You'll notice you have a little button right here that allows you to change what you see here in your I guess, digital gauge cluster. So it's a little hard to tell the exact separation here. It's probably right here where it goes from touchscreen to just your gauge display right here. But you can switch it to a few different displays. You've got Google Maps, you've got your driver assistance view, and then you've got your normal, I think what they call the condensed view. So this view is pretty typical for a vehicle. You just have your speedometer in the middle, you have your media, and then you have like a sort of power gauge right here. Pretty much shows everything you need to see here. You've also got the heads-up display functions here. So this is the thing that I just blew my mind. The fact that this vehicle has a standard heads-up display, whereas most vehicles, the heads-up display is probably on the top trim or in an expensive package. This one just comes with one, which is mind-boggling, honestly. So you can kind of see right there. It's not the most interesting heads-up display, but it's certainly adequate. It shows your speedometer, I think it shows speed limits. It does show directions as well if you use the built-in navigation or if you use Apple Maps, which is pretty cool. If you use Google Maps, it does not show. So unfortunately, Google Maps users will be a little disappointed by that. I do really like that you can adjust the heads-up display here. I think that's a very neat place to kind of hide it, and it's relatively intuitive. Also, some hidden buttons over here are going to be your parking brake, your lane display assist, or your lane departure assist. And then here is your drive mode selector right here, actually. So you've got a few different drive modes right here. It's kind of interesting because I really don't know how often anyone will take their cars off-roading or their Buick Envision off-roading. Sport, wow, what a sporty Envision. I really don't know how much I agree with that, but you've got some cool graphics, and as you can already see, this 30-inch screen is mighty responsive. All right, let's talk about this here. This is a beautiful screen. Honestly, fantastic, right? Definitely the highlight of this interior redesign. So, I mean, just so snappy, so fast, and the fact that you have ambient lighting and that is standard is pretty neat. You've got a lot of different colors to choose from. Climate menu is right here, but you also have physical buttons right below, which is awesome. I think this is honestly the ideal way to do it. You have a mixture of physical climate controls and some settings up here as well, like the auto, which is actually, I guess, is right here as well. But yeah, it's certainly a good setup. I think everyone will be happy with it, and I love the clean look right here. It's just one little row of buttons, and I think that's all you need. So yeah, overall, this screen is very impressive. Apple CarPlay looks really great. Because it's a little bit of a weird orientation and shape, Apple CarPlay doesn't really go into this little edge area, but I think it looks pretty fine. You get a wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto standard, as well as a nice wireless Qi charging pad. So a lot of standard features, which is very neat. One thing before we go into the rest of this here, I do want to point out is that this is actually going to be your gear shift, which is, it's interesting. Once you read this a little bit, you can kind of understand what it does. Park is just this button on the side of the stalk, but to go into reverse, you have to go push in and then up. So right, so that arrow is showing you in, then up, and then neutral is just in, and then drive, you go in and down. So it's actually quite intuitive. It kind of simulates the gear shift, but it's on a stalk instead of your typical position right here. And last thing before we move on to the rear seats here, which is always an important part of a compact SUV, wanted to show you guys a few cool things in the system here in terms of safety features. So you've got this camera widget right here, which pulls up your 360 camera, which is standard, right? That is so cool. But I wish there was a way to make it larger. If anyone knows of a way, let me know. But it's very strange to me that you've got the 360 camera, and it's honestly quite high resolution as well, but it's so small. I mean, honestly, like, the real estate couldn't have been used more poorly, in my opinion, here. Your rear view camera looks fine here, but it's just so small, right? Like, the resolution actually looks quite high. You do have a few options here. You can change your display, which is always cool. You can see kind of how close you are to curbs and stuff like that. But I think overall, I would just love a larger display, right? Like, I think it would just make a lot more sense. Oh, I guess if you disable the top down, it actually makes this larger. But honestly, everyone loves 360 cameras, right? I hope so, because I find them very useful personally. But yeah, so kind of a strange choice of how to display the 360 camera, but it is very functional and works pretty intuitively. You do have blind spot monitors standard, rear cross traffic alert standard, a lot of safety features. So this vehicle really is king when it comes to standard features. It blows any competitor out of the water in that area. For the entry-level trim at about $35,000 for the MSRP, this certainly comes with way more than most vehicles. All right, we're back outside, and now let's go into the second row. Oh, it locked me out already. So pressing that button is pretty easy to use. Okay, going into the second row, you can immediately see we do have a decent amount of space. This is a compact SUV, so it's not going to be the king of leg room or anything like that, but it certainly should be usable for a family. And this one certainly is. So this is with my normal seating position as the driver, and you do have ample leg room for your passenger back here. You also got great headroom. I think that's the most impressive part, is that because they're not trying to do any sort of coupé, sporty styling on this vehicle, you have a generous amount of headroom. In terms of these seats, they're pretty bare bones, but you do have some nice looking stitching, and there's still that same ebony color, so not too exciting. Nothing really notable about the seat belts or anything like that, but they're pretty comfortable seats. I think all leather throughout the cabin definitely is still pretty impressive, definitely feels premium. All right, let's take the 2024 Buick Envision out for a drive. So the exterior, I think, is pretty cool. I love the refresh. I think they did a great job there. The interior also is very impressive, right? That 30-inch screen looks extraordinarily luxurious, and I think the interior generally does have pretty classy vibes. But the driving part is certainly where I think this vehicle falls a little flat compared to some of its competitors. So at about the $35,000 price point, you're more expensive than the RAV4, the CR-V, a lot of those, classic vehicles that people go to for their reliability. And honestly, when you get the higher trims of those, which are about the same price as this, they can come with a lot more goodies. I will say though, the packaging on this car is so confusing. The fact that the standard base entry-level trim has a heads-up display is unheard of. I've never seen that in a vehicle before. The fact that it doesn't have dual zone climate control as well is super, super weird. The lack of any sort of sunroof is kind of disappointing there, but you can get that as a $1,500 option. Standard all-wheel drive is great. The standard 360 camera is also unheard of, right? Like these are, I don't know, those sort of things where I was so shocked when I got in this vehicle and I was like, wow, ambient lighting, a Bose sound system, which is awful, but like, all these different things. And I was like, how is this the entry-level trim, right? Like, Buick it's probably a good idea overall, because I do think that gives Buick an edge over some of its competitors when it comes to technology. The vehicle definitely does a good job in that department, right? You're not going to get a heads-up display on a RAV4 or CR-V, unless maybe you're at the very top trim, which is going to be more expensive than this base trim here. But the problem here is that Buick really does market it as a luxury premium vehicle, and comparing it to things like the X3, which is, starts up over $12,000 more than this vehicle, the X3 is just a much better offering. So in terms of ride quality, I think this vehicle rides okay. It's certainly not as comfortable as any of the luxury rivals like the Lexus NX, which is much closer in price points, right? The Lexus NX is about, I believe, like a little bit over $40K for the starting price there. It's certainly a more comfortable ride and just a more luxurious feeling vehicle in general. But the ride quality is fine. It feels more like a RAV4 than it's going to feel like an X3. So they say that they have this thing called quiet tuning with acoustic noise cancellation in this vehicle. I don't really know where that is or what it does, because I certainly don't feel that at all. This vehicle is quite loud, definitely feels more like an economy vehicle than a luxury vehicle. The sound deadening, not that great, very high road noise and things like that. Driving isn't difficult though, like steering is very easy. It doesn't feel underpowered, even though it's pretty slow, right? 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds is not fast, but very similar to the Lexus NX that I drove recently. So while the engine and just the general driving experience doesn't feel that great, it's certainly not bad, right? This is a vehicle meant for people who don't really want that specific driving joy, right? If you want that, you're probably going to have to go for the BMW or even the Mazda CX-5, which certainly feels a lot more peppy than this vehicle. Ultimately, this vehicle does present a pretty interesting choice for buyers, right? You've got a more expensive vehicle than your typical economy vehicles, but certainly cheaper than the luxury counterparts. So I do think it's actually priced in a very interesting area where if you want that sort of kind of luxury brand, I think this is a good option, honestly. The exterior is quite attractive in my opinion, especially that front. The interior looks way more modern than previously, so I think this definitely does compete with some of the luxury rivals out there. So if you want to get a relatively affordable semi-luxury vehicle that has some pretty great features, heads-up display, beautiful 30-inch screen, tiny little surround view camera, but it's there nonetheless, I think this is actually a very compelling choice in the segment. Personally, I don't think I would ever choose this over just a decked out RAV4 CR-V, or perhaps just a base trim of the NX or something like that, because the pricing does get very similar to those vehicles. You know, maybe for this vehicle you'd want to step up to the ST trim or the Avenir, although honestly, given that this has so much technology in it already, I don't think I would do that personally. But if you really find the styling of this vehicle very attractive and kind of like the price point it comes in at, I think this will do just fine for buyers. So that's pretty much all I had to talk through today. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out my other videos up here, subscribe down here, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Thanks everyone, bye.